Is it offensive to call a redhead a ginger? So I just rewatched this great comedy by Tim Minchin, and here are the questions. How bad offensive is the G word? Really, other than being an anagram of the N word? What are alternatives? Is redhead more appropriate?
Is it offensive to call a redhead a ginger? Yes, quite possibly, but the offensive word isn't ginger, it's a. If you say he's ginger, you're describing a distinctive physical feature. Useful if you want to recognize him on your blind date. If you say he's a ginger, you're suggesting that his gingerness is his most important quality. This is rarely helpful and, in light of the recent spate of gingers have no friends jokes, best avoided. If you say he's a ginger, with quotes around the word ginger, well, that's just off the scale. Winky face. Of course, context is everything. For our April issue, I think we should use the ginger for the front cover and the blonde for the centerfold. Okay. I thank the ginger delegate for the interesting points he raised about the Child Poverty Action Plan. Facetious.
Thanks for the question, I think it's a good one. Here's what I think. Alternatives, redhead is right, I think. It seems to be the analog of blonde or brunette. What you'd be looking for is a straightforward descriptive term, and that would be it. A term like ronga obviously has a large, derogatory, evaluative, value judgment flavor to it. You've got red hair, and that's a bad thing, which is obviously the analog of you've got black skin, and that's a bad thing. If you follow such an analysis, then there is still a case for considering ginger to have a strong evaluative flavor. The usage I'm familiar with is he, she is a ginger, and almost never he, she has ginger hair. So the implication is a conceptual reduction of the person to a ginger rather than someone with ginger hair. It says what you are is a ginger. Like saying someone is a black and defining what they are by the color of their skin. Of course, on the same analysis, ronga is a terrible word, which is indeed common currency here in Australia, like banga for the indigenous. But certainly, context is important. As someone mentioned, the history of oppression of darker-skinned races makes discriminating along those lines much more severe than discrimination along the lines of hair color. Still, the analogy between the two is pretty significant. I would certainly never use the word.
It appears to be getting more offensive, and the amount of offense caused seems to be geographic. I think the offense really depends where you are in the world. After that, it's quite a subjective question. Here in the UK, it's still quite widely used, but politicians/celebrities that use the phrase, or phrases like it, get criticized. The criticism isn't enough to get someone fired, but an apology is probably needed. See the recent news article about Harriet Harman calling someone a ginger rodent. BTW, there's also a fair bit of pushback against how offensive the use of ginger is in comparison to other racial slurs. There's no history of slavery associated with red hair, and this fact is increasingly mentioned in conversations about ginger. I don't think this gets to the root of the issue here in the UK though. Ginger hair is associated with the underclasses. If that association gets stronger, then maybe the word will be seen as being more offensive. I think the best I can give you is we'll see.
I know it has been mentioned earlier here, but in the US people really do not use the word ginger to describe a person with red hair. That word only became known to Americans because of Harry Potter, so it is fairly recent. Trey Parker and Matt Stone ruthlessly capitalized upon it in South Park, but it was around before that thanks to Rowling's books. They did not edit it in the US edition. More commonly on this side of the pond you'd hear the phrase, carrot top, or titian head, to describe a redhead, and neither are pejorative. Another favorite American term is firecrotch, but this term subscribes more to an old cultural belief that redheads are sexy, wild, and vivacious. You'd say it to your lover to flirt or talk dirty. Whatever else, it should never be directed at someone else's mate lest said mate try to rip you to shreds. For decades, in stark contrast to the UK stigma, the smoking hot redhead has been a staple of American movies, comics, and cartoon for generations. Jessica Rabbit, Christina Hendricks, Poison Ivy, Rita Hayworth, Ariel the Mermaid, Nicole Kidman, they are proof Americans worship fiery locks. Jessica Rabbit's sizzling rendition of Why Don't You Do Right? launched many a young American lad into puberty, and 20 years later their adult selves still peak at it, drilling. Several Hollywood actresses have paid thousands of dollars to get that coppery cascade of curls, among them Amy Adams and Emma Stone, and lately the boys have been getting in on the action. One of the sexiest men in Hollywood right now is Damian Lewis, who women swoon over.
Yes, use of the term ginger is offensive. As a natural redhead, I am highly offended at the use of the word ginger, freck, referring to freckles, red, carrot top, ronga, or any other term that people may come up with to refer to us. Verbal abuse is never okay.
If you want to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing.